Section 32 of The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 1, by Cao Xueqin. Translated by Henry Bancroft Jolly. Chapter 15, Part 1. Lady Feng, née Wang, exercises her authority in the Iron Fence Temple. Qin Jingqing, Qin amuses himself in the mantou (bread) nunnery. But we shall now resume our story. When Pao Yu raised his eyes, he noticed that Shui Rong, Prince of Peking, wore on his head a princely cap with pure white tassels and silvery feathers, that he was apparelled in a white ceremonial robe, with a pattern representing the tooth-like ripple of a river and the waters of the sea, embroidered with 5-clawed dragons, and that he was girded with a red leather belt, inlaid with white jade; that his face was like a beauteous gem, that his eyes were like sparkling stars, and that he was, in very truth, a human being full of graceful charms. Pao Yu hastily pressed forward and made a reverent obeisance, and Shui Rong lost no time in extending his arms from inside the sedan chair and embracing him. At a glance he saw that Pao Yu had on his head a silver cap, to which the hair was attached, that he had, round his forehead, a flap on which were embroidered a couple of dragons issuing from the sea, that he wore a white archery sleeve robe ornamented with dragons, and that his waist was encircled by a silver belt inlaid with pearls, that his face resembled vernal flowers, and that his eyes were like drops of lacquer. Shui Rong smiled. "Your name is," he said, "no trumped-up story, for you, verily, resemble a precious gem; but where's the valuable trinket you had in your mouth?" he inquired. As soon as Pao Yu heard this inquiry, he hastened to produce the jade from inside his clothes, and to hand it over to Shui Rong. Shui Rong minutely examined it, and having also read the motto on it, he consequently ascertained whether it was really efficacious or not. "It's true that it's said to be," Pao Yu promptly explained, "but it hasn't yet been put to the test." Shui Rong extolled it with unbounded praise, and, as he did so, he set the variegated tassels in proper order, and with his own hands attached it on to Pao Yu's neck. Taking also his hand in his, he inquired of Pao Yu what was his age, and what books he was reading at present; to each of which questions Pao Yu gave suitable answer. Shui Rong, perceiving the perspicacity of his speech, and the propriety of his utterances, simultaneously turned towards Chia Cheng, and observed with a smile on his face, "Your worthy son is, in very truth, like a young of a dragon, or like the nestling of a phoenix. And this isn't an idle compliment which I, a despicable prince, utter in your venerable presence. But how much more glorious will be, in the future, the voice of the young phoenix than that of the old phoenix, it isn't easy to ascertain." Chia Cheng forced a smile. "My cur-like son," he replied, "cannot presume to such bountiful praise and golden commendation, but if, by the virtue of your highness' excess of happiness, he does indeed realize your words, he will be a source of joy to us all." "There's one thing, however," continued Shui Rong, "with the excellent abilities which your worthy scion possesses, he is sure, I presume, to be extremely loved by her dowager ladyship, his grandmother, and by all classes. But for young men of our age, it's a great drawback to be doted upon, for, with over fondness, we cannot help utterly frustrating the benefits of education. When I, a despicable prince, was young, I walked in this very track, and I presume that your honourable son cannot likewise but do the same. By remaining at home, your worthy scion will find it difficult to devote his attention to study, and he will not reap any harm, were he to come, at frequent intervals, to my humble home; for, though my deserts be small, I nevertheless enjoy the great honour of the acquaintance of all the scholars of note in the empire, so that, whenever any of them visit the capital, not one of them is there who does not lower his blue eyes upon me. Hence it is that in my mean abode eminent worthies rendezvous; and were your esteemed son to come, as often as he can, and converse with them and meet them, his knowledge would, in that case, have every opportunity of making daily strides towards improvement." Chia Cheng speedily bent his body and expressed his acquiescence, by way of reply; whereupon Shih Jung went further, and taking off from his wrist a chaplet of pearls, he presented it to Pao yü. "This is the first time we meet," he observed. "Our meeting was so unexpected that I have no suitable congratulatory present to offer you. This was conferred upon me by His Majesty, and is a string of chaplet pearls, scented with Lin Ling, which will serve as a temporary token of respectful congratulations." Pao yü hastened to receive it from his hands, and turning round, he reverently presented it to Chia Cheng. Chia Cheng and Pao yü jointly returned thanks, and forthwith Chia She, Chia Cheng, and the rest came forward in a body and requested the prince to turn his chair homewards. "The departed," expostulated Shih Jung, "has already ascended the spiritual regions, and is no more a mortal being in this dusty world exposed to vicissitude like you and I. Although a mean prince like me has been the recipient of the favour of the emperor, and has undeservedly been called to the princely inheritance, how could I presume to go before the spiritual hearse and return home?" Chia She and the others, perceiving how persistent he was in his refusal, had no course but to take their leave, express their sense of gratitude, and to rejoin the cortege. They issued orders to their servants to stop the band, and to hush the music, and making the procession go by, they at length left the way clear for Shih Jung to prosecute his way. But we will now leave him, and resume our account of the funeral of the Ning mansion. All along its course the road was plunged in unusual commotion. As soon as they reached the city gates, Chia She, Chia Cheng, Chia Chen, and the others again received donations from all their fellow officers and subordinates, in sacrificial sheds erected by their respective families, and after they returned thanks to one after another, they eventually issued from the city walls, and proceeded eventually along the highway, in the direction of the Temple of the Iron Fence. Chia Chen, at this time, went together with Chia Jung up to all their seniors, and pressed them to get into their sedan chairs, and to ride their horses; and Chia She and all of the same age as himself were consequently induced to mount into their respective carriages or chairs. Chia Chen and those of the same generation were likewise about to ride their horses, when lady Feng, through her solicitude on Pao yü's account, gave way to fears lest now that they had reached the open country he should do as he pleased, and not listen to the words of any of the household, and lest Chia Chen should not be able to keep him in check; and, as she dreaded that he might go astray, she felt compelled to bid a youth call him to her, and Pao yü had no help but to appear before her curricle. "My dear brother," lady Feng remarked smiling, "you are a respectable person, and like a girl in your ways, and shouldn't imitate those monkeys on horseback. Do get down and let both of you and I sit together in this carriage, and won't that be nice?" At these words, Pao yü readily dismounted, and climbed up into the carriage occupied by lady Feng, and they both talked and laughed as they continued their way. But not a long time elapsed before two men, on horseback, were seen approaching from the opposite direction. Coming straight up to lady Feng's vehicle, they dismounted, and said, as they leaned on the sides of her carriage, "There's a halting place here, and will it not please your ladyship to have a rest and change?" Lady Feng directed them to ask the two ladies Xing and Wang what they would like to do, and the two men explained, "These ladies have signified that they had no desire to rest, and they wish your ladyship to suit your convenience." Lady Feng speedily issued orders that they should have a rest, before they prosecuted their way, and the servant youth led the harnessed horses through the crowd of people, and came towards the north, while Pao yü, from inside the carriage, urgently asked that Mr. Ch'in should be requested to come. Ch'in Chung was at this moment on horseback following in the track of his father's carriage, when unexpectedly he caught sight of Pao yü's page, come at a running pace and invite him to have some refreshment. Ch'in Chung perceived from a distance that the horse, which Pao yü had been riding, walked behind lady Feng's vehicle, as it went towards the north, with its saddle and bridles all piled up, and readily concluding that Pao yü must be in the same carriage with that lady, he too turned his horse and came over in haste and entered, in their company, the door of a farmhouse. This dwelling of the farmers did not contain many rooms, so that the women and girls had nowhere to get out of the way; and when the village lasses and country women perceived the bearing and costumes of lady Feng, Pao yü and Ch'in Chung, they were inclined to suspect that celestial beings had descended into the world. Lady Feng entered the thatched house, and, in the first place, asked Pao yü and the rest to go out and play. Pao yü took the hint, and, along with Ch'in Chung, he led off the servant boys and went to romp all over the place. The various articles in use among the farmers they had not seen before, with the result that, after Pao yü had inspected them, he thought them all very strange, but he could neither make out their names nor their uses. But among the servant boys there were those who knew, and they explained to them, one after another, what they were called, as well as what they were for. As Pao yü, after this explanation, nodded his head, "It isn't strange," he said, "that an old writer has this line in his poetical works: 'Who can realize that the food in a bowl is, grain by grain, all the fruit of labour?' This is indeed so." As he spoke, they had come into another house, and at the sight of a spinning wheel on a stove bed, they thought it still more strange and wonderful, but the servant boys again told them that it was used for spinning the yarn to weave cloth with; and Pao yü speedily jumping on to the stove bed, set to work turning the wheel for the sake of fun, when a village lass of about 17 or 18 years of age came forward, and asked them not to meddle with it and spoil it. The servant boys promptly stopped her interference, but Pao yü himself desisted, as he added, "It's because I hadn't seen one before that I came to try it for fun." "You people can't do it," rejoined the lass; "let me turn it for you to see." Ch'in Chung secretly pulled Pao yü and remarked, "It's great fun in this village." But Pao yü gave him a nudge and observed, "If you talk nonsense again, I'll beat you." Watching intently as he uttered these words, the village girl who started reeling the thread, and presented, in very truth, a pretty sight. But suddenly an old woman from the other side gave a shout, "My girl Secunda, come over at once!" and the lass discarded the spinning wheel and hastily went on her way. Pao yü was the while feeling disappointed and unhappy, when he espied a servant, whom lady Feng had sent, come and call them both in. Lady Feng had washed her hands and changed her costume, and asked him whether he would change or not; and Pao yü, having replied, "No, it doesn't matter after all if I don't change," the female attendants served tea, cakes and fruits, and also poured the scented tea. Lady Feng and the others drank their tea, and waiting until they had put the various articles by, and made all the preparations, they promptly started to get into their carriages. Outside, Wang Erh had got ready tips and gave them to the people of the farm, and the farm women and all the inmates went up to them to express their gratitude; but when Pao yü came to look carefully, he failed to see anything of the lass who had reeled the thread. But they had not gone far before they caught sight of this girl Secunda, coming along with a small child in her arms, who, they concluded, was her younger brother, laughing and chatting, in company with a few young girls. Pao yü could not suppress the voice of love, but being seated in the carriage, he was compelled to satisfy himself by following her with his eyes. Soon, however, the vehicle sped on as rapidly as a cloud impelled by the wind, so that when he turned his head round, there was already no vestige to be seen of her. But while they were bandying words, they had unexpectedly overtaken the great concourse of the cortege. Likewise, at an early stage men were stationed ahead, with Buddhist drums and gold cymbals, with streamers and jewelled coverings, and the whole company of bronzes belonging to the iron fence temple had already been drawn out in a line by the sides of the road. In a short while they reached the interior of the temple, where additional sacrifices were offered, and Buddhistic services performed, and where altars had again been erected to burn incense on. The coffin was deposited in a side room of the inner court, and Pao Chu got ready a bedroom in which she could keep her watch. In the outer apartments, Chia Chen did the honors among the whole party of relatives and friends, some of whom asked to be allowed to stay for their meals, while others at this stage took their leave. And after they had one by one returned thanks, the dukes, marquises, earls, viscounts and barons, each in respective batches, got up to go, and they kept on leaving from between 1 and 3 p.m. before they had finally all dispersed. In the inner chambers, the ladies were solely entertained and attended to by lady Feng. First to make a move were the consorts of officials, and noon had also come, by the time the whole party of them had taken their departure. Those that remained were simply a few relatives of the same clan and others like them, who eventually left after the completion of the 3 days' rationalistic liturgies. The two ladies Hsing and Wang, well aware at this time that lady Feng could on no account return home, desired to enter the city at once, and madame Wang wanted to take Pao Yu home. But Pao Yu, who had, on an unexpected occasion, come out into the country, entertained, of course, no wish to go back, and he would agree to nothing else than to stay behind with lady Feng, so that madame Wang had no alternative but to hand him over to her charge and to start. This temple of the iron fence had, in fact, been erected in days gone by, at the expense of the two dukes, Ning and Jung, and there still remained up to these days acres of land, from which were derived the funds for incense and lights for such occasions, on which the coffins of any members, old or young, who died in the capital, had to be deposited in this temple. And the inner and outer houses in this compound were all kept in readiness and good order, for the accommodation of those who formed part of the cortege. At this time, as it happened, the descendants mustered an immense crowd, and among them were poor and rich of various degrees, or with likes and dislikes diametrically opposed. There were those who, being in straitened circumstances at home, and easily contented, readily took up their quarters in the temple; and there were those with money and position, and with extravagant ideas, who maintained that the accommodation in the temple was not suitable, and, of course, went in search of additional quarters, either in country houses, or in convents, where they could have their meals and retire after the ceremonies were over. On the occasion of Mrs. Ch'in's funeral, all the members of the clan put up temporarily in the iron fence temple. Lady Feng alone looked down upon it as inconvenient, and consequently dispatched a servant to go and tell Jing Xu, a nun in the bread convent, to empty 2 rooms for her to go and live in. This bread convent had at one time been styled the Shui Yue nunnery, water moon, but as good bread was made in that temple, it gave rise to this nickname. This convent was not very distant from the temple of the iron fence, so that as soon as the bonzes brought their functions to a close, and the sacrifice of evening was offered, Chia Chen asked Chia Jung to request lady Feng to retire to rest; and as lady Feng perceived that there still remained several sisters-in-law to keep company to the female relatives, she readily, of her own accord, took leave of the whole party, and, along with Pao Yu and Qin Zhong, came to the Water Moon Convent. Qin Ye, it must be noticed, was advanced in years and a victim to many ailments, so that he was unable to remain in the temple long, and he bade Qin Zhong tarry until the coffin had been set in its resting place, with the result that Qin Zhong came along, at the same time as lady Feng and Pao Yu, to the Water Moon Convent, where Jing Xu appeared, together with 2 neophytes, Zhi Shan and Zhi Neng, to receive them. After they had exchanged greetings, lady Feng and the others entered the chaste apartments to change their clothes and wash their hands, and when they had done, as she perceived how much taller in stature Zhi Neng had grown, and how much handsomer were her features, she felt prompted to inquire, "How is it that your priors and yourselves haven't been all these days as far as our place?" "It's because during these days we haven't had any time which we could call our own," explained Jing Xu, "owing to the birth of a son in Mr. Hu's mansion, Dame Hu sent over about 10 tales, and asked that we should invite several head nuns to read during 3 days the service for the churching of women, with the result that we've been so very busy, and had so little leisure, that we couldn't come over to pay our respects to your ladyship." Section 32